All through the twilight of the Second Age, the shadow is growing in the east of Middle-earth, spreading its sway more and more over men, who multiply as the elves begin to fade. The three main themes are thus: the delaying elves that lingered in Middle-earth, Sauron's growth to a new Dark Lord, master and god of men, and Númenor Atlantis. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. This past Thursday/Friday saw the release of the first 2 episodes of The Rings of Power by Amazon, and my thoughts on those episodes are up on the channel and other videos. As for this video, while its timing is certainly not unrelated to the release of the show, it will be independent from it mostly. I won't really discuss The Rings of Power here, besides perhaps a few references. Rather, this video will outline my current thoughts on how I would hypothetically organize and do a television show set in the Second Age of Middle-earth if given the opportunity, time, money, and desire to do it. I'm not saying that my version is at all the perfect or best way to do it, as I'm sure I will miss some things or could do certain things better, but this will detail my rough outline and ideas on how I would put this show together. Let me know what your thoughts are and how you would organize a Second Age show in the comments below. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. First, let's start with some logistics. From the outset, I would not even attempt a Second Age show at all without the rights to The Lord of the Rings and its appendices, The Hobbit, and most importantly, The Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales. I would also want access to the History of Middle-earth saga and any other notes or books that Tolkien wrote, but with emphasis on the books that I already mentioned. Unless I had access to all of the rights to the Second Age extended lore, I would not even attempt this personally, as I feel like it would be trying to paint the Mona Lisa without half of the paint colors, which would force me to improv and work around some essential components, thus making an end product pale in comparison to what I set out to achieve. It just, in the end, wouldn't be worth it. Again, not entirely referencing The Rings of Power here, but if they don't have the rights to everything that should be necessary for a story like this, we'll definitely be able to tell by its quality. If I did not have the rights to the Second Age, I would choose to tell a different story instead. Likely one from the appendices about the Angmar War, or the Gondorian Civil War, or the Fall of Moria, etc. Now, assuming I had all of the rights for a project in the Second Age, I myself would plan for 3 seasons. Like Tolkien wrote in his letter, the quote at the beginning of this video, the Second Age really has 3 main themes going on: the delaying of the elves in Middle-earth, Sauron's growth to a new Dark Lord, and the fall of Númenor. Ultimately, these 3 themes would guide the 3 seasons of the show. I would have 3 seasons of 8 to 10 episodes, each an hour long, to depict all of the important stories without drawing it out too long. Perhaps this could be split into more seasons, but I would really like to avoid filler as best as possible for a show like this, and keep everything as interesting as possible in every episode. Likely there would have to be some measure of time compression as well, but the Second Age is 3,441 years long, and the problem with that, especially as far as mortal characters are concerned, is that that might be too much time for not enough events, or too much time for not enough characters to grow and have arcs. I know, it is too bad that we'd have to move the time around at all, but it would be necessary to make our mortal Númenorian characters stick around for longer and actually have character arcs. In any adaptation, some things do have to be changed. I will get into more specifics in a bit, but from the outset, Season 1 depicts the forging of the Rings of Power and the War of the Elves and Sauron as its primary plot, with the foundation and rise of Númenor as its secondary plot. The featured main and supporting characters of Season 1 would be Gil-galad, Elrond, Galadriel, Celeborn, Celebrimbor, with some supporting moments from Círdan the Shipwright and Glorfindel for the Elves when he shows up, Durin the Third, and Narvi from the Dwarves, amongst other original dwarves, Elros Tar Miniatur, Vientur the Captain, Aldarion the Mariner, his father Tarmin Eldor, Arendis Aldarion's wife, and Commander Kiryutur for men, and Anatar/Sauron for evil. Likely, just to fill out the world a little bit more, there would need to be some original characters invented for the show, especially for the dwarves, but they would really only be there to help fill out the world a bit more and support our Tolkien characters far more, rather than being main characters themselves. Perhaps a villain serving Sauron at this time would need to be added to the coasts of Middle-earth to present a threat to the Númenorians during Season 1, for instance. In Season 2, the primary plot and secondary plot would actually switch from Season 1, and become the opposite of what it was, as the Elves of Middle-earth become the secondary plot, and the Men of Númenor become the primary plot. This season depicts the men of Númenor beginning to falter into shadow and run into some issues, dealing with the capture of Sauron and the fall of Númenor for the primary plot, with the elves rebuilding from the war with Sauron and further befriending the Númenorians and trying to investigate what's going on with the Rings of Power in Middle-earth. Again, this is where time compression would happen, to perhaps more closely connect the seasons together. The main characters in this season would be Amandil, Elendil, Isildur, Anarion, Tar Palantir, Ar-Pharazôn, Tar Miriel, and Sauron in Númenor, likely with the wives of the House of Amandil also being added into the cast. And then the before-mentioned elves in Middle-earth and the dwarves crowning perhaps King Durin IV or V, depending on how much time is compressed, would also all be present. Perhaps for those in Middle-earth, the Nazgul would begin to appear, causing a threat for them and their story, as they perhaps investigate what happened to the Rings of Power. Finally, Season 3 presents the primary and secondary plots becoming one, as we would see the creation of Gondor and Arnor in Middle-earth, the friendship between elves, dwarves, and men, and the fight against Sauron, who destroyed a realm of the elves in Season 1 and a realm of men in Season 2. This common enemy brings our characters together, many of whom would still be alive from Season 2, yet many of these characters would perish in Season 3. Now, with these outlines present, let me get into more specifics regarding each season and some interesting scenes that I have in mind. Now, of course, so much would have to be filled out by the writers to make 3 seasons of high-quality Second Age content, but as long as the writers would go back to those 3 Tolkienian themes that we discussed earlier, and since we would hopefully have rights to everything in this hypothetical scenario, it shouldn't be much of a problem. Season 1 would begin with a shot of unknown characters, men on a ship. At the head, the man, the captain, who we see from behind, looks up from his boat at a star in the sky, the evening star, the star of Eärendil, which guides these men to Númenor. And the man turns to tell his men the direction for which to continue, and he looks strangely like an elf. The first line of the series begins with Elros Tar Miniatur, the first king of Númenor, brother of Elrond, leading his people to Westerness, their beloved island. The camera would rise up and we would see the many ships of the Edain, soon to be known as Dunedain, coming to Númenor. This would begin the secondary plot, as Gil-galad's conversation with Celebrimbor about the elf leaving to establish an elven land in Eregion would begin the primary plot with the elves. During the early season, we see Númenor in its early days, its people reflecting on the War of Wrath and looking towards the future. We see the rise and eventual death of King Elros. Some time passing and compression and perhaps other events would eventually lead us to Vientur and the first travels of the Númenorians back to Middle-earth. Then, with the introduction of Aldarion the Prince and Arendis, Númenor would begin to see a bit of drama and strife in its early days between the prince and his father Tar Mineldur, especially as they received word from Gil-galad of a growing darkness and foreboding in Middle-earth. The main conflict here would be whether Númenorians should do anything at all in Middle-earth, or whether they should stay upon their island and be as sea kings. Eventually, Season 1's secondary plot with Númenor would end with them inevitably helping the elves in the War of the Elves and Sauron in the final episode, as the man Kirjatur leads a fleet to save the elves. We would see a bit of jealousy on behalf of the Númenorians for the elven immortality, but mostly, during this season we would see the Númenorian rise to glory throughout, from one ship coming to Middle-earth, Vienturs, to an entire host of ships, Kirjaturs, who have decided to come back to Middle-earth and aid the elves in the end. Admittedly, this plot would need some more conflict present, I think, but that's ultimately the layout. Again, perhaps they're going against someone on the coasts of Middle-earth who serves Sauron. The primary plot, however, is a lot easier to lay out, as we would see the rise of Eregion under Celebrimbor and his friendship with the dwarves of Moria, the travels of Galadriel and Celeborn, the lies of Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, the crafting of the Rings of Power, the forging of the One Ring, and the eventual and inevitable War of the Elves and Sauron that, like the War of the Last Alliance at the end of the series, involves all of our main characters at this point in the plot. Season 2 would then kick off once more with the secondary plot, with a mirror of Elros Tar Miniatur, as Elrond establishes Rivendell with Celeborn and invites the Great Elves to regroup there. This secondary plot would perhaps see Glorfindel, Celeborn, Galadriel, and others investigate after Sauron, who is beginning this season, as we come to see by giving the Rings of Power to dwarves and men, even as the 3 elves guard their own rings. From time to time, we would check in on the dwarves and their kingdom, the crown passing on. Eventually, the elves would discover the corrupted men, the Nazgul, who begin readying Mordor for Sauron's eventual return from Númenor after he has been captured. And the elves discover Sauron's plans to destroy Númenor somehow. They are too late to warn the faithful of his treachery, but they do know that another war with Sauron is coming after they fend off the Nazgul. There's a bit of an original plot here, but only to involve these characters in the telling of the greater story, and to showcase a bit more adventure in Middle-earth during the season. Otherwise, the elves might not have much to do. As for the primary plot with the Númenóreans, we get a contrast between Ar-Pharazôn and his friend Amandiel, as Númenor is becoming quickly divided between the faithful and the king's men. Those differences are explored, and we even see the civil war that breaks out in the lore on screen. The faithful are thus persecuted, Sauron is captured by the new and last king, Ar-Pharazôn, and we see Númenor fall before our very eyes. Isildur saves the sapling of the White Tree, and the king's men go to war with Valinor, after the destruction of the White Tree. The island is also destroyed. The world is clearly reshaped as we get reactions from the elves and dwarves in Middle-earth, as the ground begins to shake and things change. The final shot of Season 2, to mirror the first shot of Season 1 of the arrival to the island, is Elendil, the new king of the Númenóreans who survived and are aligned with him, sailing away from the wreckage of his home, perhaps even following the evening star of Eärendil once more, but this time to Middle-earth. Season 3 kicks off with Elendil coming to Middle-earth, where we left off in the last season, and the first words we hear are Elendil's famous oath as he steps foot in Middle-earth. Et Eärello Endorena Utulian, Sinome Maruvan ar Hildinar, ten Ambar Meta. For a while, our focus is on Elendil and his sons Isildur and Anarion, as his sons landed in a different place in Middle-earth, in the south, and they all established their respective kingdoms. Soon we see Gil-galad meet with and befriend Elendil, and realize that the two plots are now running together, as the elves tell men about the Rings of Power and their investigations, and who these rings have been given to. Throughout the season, the kingdoms are being built. We see awesome cities like Anúminas, Fornost, Minas Ithil, Osgiliath, Minas Anor, and strongholds like Engranost or Isengard, and Aglarond or the Hornburg. We see the planting of the White Tree, the oath of the men of the mountains, the distribution of the Palantiri, and so forth. Only for Sauron to come in and invade Minas Ithil partway through the season, starting the War of the Last Alliance. Then we follow our main characters, Isildur, Anarion, Elendil, Gil-galad, Elrond, and others, as they unite and gather allies we perhaps haven't even met yet, such as King Amdir and Prince Amroth of Lorinond, or Orifer and Threnduil of the Greenwood. We see the men of the mountains break their oath, even as later we see Elendil and Gil-galad pledge their own oath of friendship to each other. Then we behold the glory and hardship of the war to end the Second Age, and our show in a way that perhaps pays homage to Peter Jackson's take on the beginning of his Lord of the Rings movies, but in a way that is also closer to the books, with the best fight of the series being between Elendil, Gil-galad, and Sauron. After their collective fall, we get a relief like the threat is over, but we all know it's not, as we see Isildur take the One Ring as a Wergild. In the final episode, and perhaps the final shots of Season 3 and the series at large, we see Isildur planting another sapling of the White Tree in Anarion's honor in Minas Anor, who we watched die from a rock thrown from Barad-dûr, even as he and Isildur fought side by side in the end. And finally, Isildur goes north with his host, only to be attacked and the ring lost in the Anduin, with the last shot of the series being the One Ring hitting the river bottom, the last lines of the show likely being those of Isildur in his last breaths, just as the first were with his ancestor. And as we started the series with Númenor upon the water, a promise of the greatness and glory to come for men, we end the series with the ring beneath the water, remembering the tragedy it has caused throughout the series, but remaining there for the incredible story that awaited it, and the hope for the future. There we are, and that, more or less, is how I would do a Second Age show. I imagine my thoughts on the matter will change over time as we get more episodes of the Rings of Power, and as I continue to learn even more about Tolkien and his stories and his lore, but what do you all think? What would you change, and how would you do a show set in the Second Age? Let me know in the comments below. And so, we come to the end of our tale. From the stories of the Second Age, those present in this video, the common theme of staying faithful to one's friends, promises, and allies is ever present. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed my thoughts on this. I'm quite excited to hear yours. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to like and share this with a friend. Again, let me know your thoughts on a Second Age show in the comments below, and let me know if you'd like to hear my thoughts on an Elder Days show or set of movies. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles through the link in the description below, or check out our merch or Patreon. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putinette, Mark Kralik, Blair Scout and Merton, John Hume, Sam McBee, Matt Sabach, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Reese Jenkins, Adam Petrlik, Brandon Glidden, Molly Sullivan, Daniel Burns, Anthony Harmon, Dorwin Gray, Arthur Merlin, DJ Vaught, and Dale Davis, our newest Valar tier patron. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members, it really means a lot. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. I'll see you all again next week with a video on Aule the Smith of the Valar. You all are the best, my friends. Thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.